Bible prophecy is active and unfolding daily. Zechariah 12, Isaiah 17, Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38. Here is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's newscast. A heavily armed couple, Syed Rizwan Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, unleashed volleys of gunfire on a holiday party in San Bernardino, California. That was on Wednesday, December 2nd, killing at least 14 people and wounding at least 21 others before leading the police on a manhunt culminating in a shootout that left the two suspects dead. This was America's worst mass shooting since the assault on an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, nearly 3 years ago. California has the strictest gun laws in the nation, but obviously that did not deter these two terrorists in the least. The couple had amassed an armory of weapons and explosives in their Redlands home, including a dozen pipe bombs and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Such an arsenal suggests that the shootings were far more than a spontaneous response to a workplace dispute. In fact, a senior federal government official said Farouk was in contact with a number of suspected extremists and had communicated with at least one person who is currently being monitored as a potential terror suspect. The source said the link suggests that there may be a deeper terror matrix. And from CNN, the father of Syed Rizwan Farouk told the Italian newspaper La Stampa that his son supported ISIS ideology. Syed told his father that he shared the ideology of ISIS leader al-Baghdadi to create an Islamic State, and he was fixated on Israel. Then, last Friday, U.S. officials said that Farouk's wife, Tashfeen Malik, posted to Facebook a pledge of allegiance to al-Baghdadi. And on November 29th, President Obama reassured Americans that there was, quote, no specific and credible intelligence indicating a plot on the homeland, close quote. And then, 7 days later, there was this San Bernardino explosion of gunfire and the deadliest terror attack in America since September 11th, 2001. But really, Obama's statement was not incorrect. The United States government had no concrete intelligence warnings of the assault that happened in San Bernardino. It was swift, ruthless, and deadly, and appeared to reflect an evolution of the terrorist threat that Obama and federal officials have been dreading, and that is homegrown, self-radicalized individuals operating undetected before striking one of many soft targets that can never be fully protected in a country as wide open and spacious as the United States is. Some personal thoughts. Last week, in the Personal Thoughts segment of my newscast, I talked about how all the players in the Middle East war actions are being deceptive about their true intentions in numerous ways, and not only with each other, but with the citizens of the nations they represent as well. And then in a recent video, I mentioned how none of us are able to judge the heart of anyone, and how only Elohim is capable of judging or knowing any person's heart. Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, chapter 17, verse 9, tells us that the heart is deceitful above all things. How many times have you been surprised about someone you thought you really knew, someone you thought you could truly trust and count on, only to one day suddenly discover that that person was made of stuff you never knew about? Have you been seeing this kind of thing happening more so lately? Because I know I have. These past few weeks, I've had a number of conversations with people that I'm very close to. People who are suddenly having problems with very close and personal relationships on levels that they've never known before. And I'm thinking this sort of thing is escalating in the world, just as we've seen events in the Middle East escalating in terms of war, and as we recently talked about also, just as we've seen the passage of time speeding up and escalating. The closer we get to the time of the tribulation, that great event which we are fast approaching now, the more Satan and his forces of darkness are growing and covering the things we see going on around us. And I think a great division is occurring, a greater division than before, a greater gap that is growing between believers in Elohim and believers in the things of the world. Yeshua said in Matityahu, that's Matthew, chapter 10, verses 34 through 39, do not think that I've come to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. That is to say, a sort of division between believers in him and unbelievers in him, or believers in the things of the world, as opposed to the things of Elohim. Verse 35, Yeshua says, "For I've come to bring division, to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law." Verse 36, he says, "And a man's enemies will be the members of his own household." And that is to say, when one believes in Elohim and another does not. Verse 37, Yeshua continues saying, "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." Verse 38, Yeshua says, "And he who does not take up his staff and follow me is not worthy of me." Note, the original Aramaic here does not say cross, he who picks up his cross and, follows me. It does not say stake, he who picks up his stake and follows me. It says, he who picks up his staff and follows me. Yeshua is talking about a walking stick here, not about people suffering as he did. Then Yeshua continues in verse 39 saying, "Whoever finds his life in this world will lose it. And whoever loses his life in this world for my sake will find it." And that is to say, he will find true life, Chai, with Yeshua for all eternity. Be careful, my friends. Remember that actions speak louder than words. Don't let yourselves be fooled by wolves in sheep's clothing. Learn to be as wise as a serpent and as innocent as a dove. In other words, having no self-serving agendas. I'm referring to Matityahu, chapter 10, verse 16. And then the path that leads to righteousness is narrow, and it's pressing, and few are those who find it. Matityahu, that's Matthew, chapter 7, verses 13 and 14 reads, "Enter through the narrow gate, because wide is the gate, and broad and easy to travel is the path that leads the way to destruction and eternal loss, and there are many who enter through it. But Small is the gate, and narrow and pressing, that is difficult to travel, is the path that leads the way to everlasting chai, life. And there are few who find it. Few who find it. Few who are looking for it. The wide path is easy to travel, and you don't even have to find it. It's right there in front of your face. It's the path that everyone is traveling. This life is all there is. Get what you can while you're here, because this is it. Career, money, home, and material possessions, that's what it's all about. That path, could even involve, we go to church and we believe in God and all that stuff, but really they spend, 90% or more of their time thinking about the things of this world. That's the broad path that almost everyone is on. You don't have to find it. It's right in front of your face. And it's an easy path to travel. Why? Because everyone's in agreement with it. If you're doing what everyone else is doing, nobody's going to give you any kind of flack about it. But the narrow path, that path is pressing. People give you a hard time if you're not doing what everyone else is doing. What, you're not putting up a Christmas tree this year? What you're lighting a Hanukkah? You're not even Jewish. You're doing this Jewish thing, but you believe in Jesus. What? His name is what? His name isn't Jesus. Yeshua. Why are you being so weird, man? Why? Why are you causing so many problems for me? This is like you're pushing me, you're pressing me, you're making things difficult. Why don't you just do what everybody else is doing, and then I won't have to, be worried about my friendship with you. The narrow path is difficult to travel on. Nobody wants you to do it, and it's hard to find, because the broad path is in front of everybody's face. Like, where's the narrow path? You can't even see it. You've got to go looking for it, and in order to do that, you have to get off the broad path where there's no map. And well, there is a map. It's the word of Elohim. But it's difficult because nobody else, all the people and family and friends, they don't want you doing this stuff. You're bothering them. So the narrow path, it's the only path that leads to righteousness, the only path that leads to pitching your tent with Elohim and making him number one on a list of one. That one's, it's hard to find. And it's difficult to walk on. You're going to get a hard time from everybody. So and because of that, there's very few people. It's like, everybody gives out. It's easier if I just follow the crowd. It's just easier. That's why Elohim refers to us as sheep. The sheep, they all flock together. And they just follow the crowd. And if it's like off a cliff, they go off the cliff. They don't question. They don't look. They don't know how to think for themselves. Geez, do I want to jump off a cliff? Everybody's going off a cliff. No, it's like everybody's going off the cliff. Let's go. Anyway, that's what's been on my mind this week. And I've seen a lot of people struggling with their loved ones because they're trying to walk on the narrow path and getting a hard time because of it. Let's turn to wars and rumors of wars. From Ynet News, a little more than a week ago, Egyptian border guards discovered a network of 17 underground tunnels with walls of iron 40 centimeters thick. That's nearly 16 inches thick. iron under the border with Gaza. Building such a tunnel would be extremely costly. The Egyptian news portal Al-Masrawi reported that Egyptian officials believe Hamas received considerable funding from Qatar to construct these tunnels. And from the Defense News, funded in part from U.S. military aid, a massive new IDF urban training base with underground facilities for anti-tunnel warfare is under construction in the Golan Heights. It's called the Sneer Training Base and is a city on top of a city with all the sophisticated instrumentation and live fire opportunities needed to train all echelons for all scenarios on the ground and under the ground. From Fox News, Russia has expanded its military operations in Syria to include a second air base. Moscow's presence has grown to 4 forward operating bases, including recently added bases in Hama and Tiyas, together with a second air base in Shayrat, near Oms, in addition to the Basul al-Assad Air Base in Latakia. TASS, Russian news agency, reports Russia has begun the supply of S-300 air defense systems to Iran. Russian Presidential Aide for Military Technical Cooperation, Vladimir Kozhin, said, quote, "The contract is in action. They have begun," close quote. That is to say, Iran will get the S-300 PMU-2 configuration. P.S. The Israel Air Force's unquestioned supremacy has kept neighboring air forces almost entirely out of Israel airspace in the country's wars. But with the recent deployment of the Russian S-400 missile defense system in Syria, that absolute primacy is now in question. The S-400 system can track and shoot down targets 400 kilometers away, a range that encompasses half of Israel, including Ben Gurion Airport. Now, for years, Israel has been preparing for the deployment of the S-300 in enemy territory, and the S-400 system is simply a more advanced form of the S-300. As Israel operates in the area protected by the S-400, it won't be easy, but it will be possible for them to take care of business. On Tuesday, December 1st, the Iraqi army sent a military force to Baiji and fired a rocket during the operation to retake the Baiji oil refinery. The main reason for this deployment is a pending military campaign to retake the town of Shargat, which is considered to be the last ISIS stronghold in the Salahuddin province. And on Thursday, December 3rd, from CNN, after the British Parliament voted 397 to 223 to approve bombing ISIS strongholds in Syria, 4 Royal Air Force Tornadoes took off from the Akrotiri Air Base in Cyprus, targeting an oil field in eastern Syria. Britain has now joined France in a U.S.-led coalition committed to attacking ISIS in its heartlands. And on Saturday, December 5th, from Beirut AFP, Syrian Turkmen rebel fighters seized 3 villages from ISIS near the Turkish border in clashes that killed 13 from the ethnic minority. This is the first time that Turkmen fighters have led the battle against ISIS, and that is due to support from Turkey. Then on Sunday, December 6th, the UK-based monitoring group Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that more than 15 explosions hit Daesh-held positions near Raqqa, the de facto capital of ISIS. More than 40 other Daesh members were also injured in the U.S.-led airstrikes, the statement added, but did not mention which country carried them out. However, it did mention that they were part of a U.S.-led attack on the Syrian territory. Casualty figures came from just one hospital, so the death toll may be higher, probably is. Groups that have received support from the United States and its allies have turned their guns on each other in a northern corner of Syria, highlighting the difficulties of mobilizing forces on the ground against ISIS. Combatants on one side are part of a new U.S.-backed alliance that includes a powerful Kurdish militia and to which Washington recently sent military aid to fight ISIS. But, get this, their opponents are backed by Turkey and have also received support in a U.S.-backed aid program. So the United States is financing both sides. Just like we've been talking about, my friends. More deceptiveness. When Yeshua's Talmudim, his disciples, asked him, how will we know the time of your return? And what will be the signs of your coming? Yeshua answered them, and he did not tell them how they would know. And he did not mention any of the signs. He does that elsewhere, like in Matthew chapter 24. But, instead, he just looked at them and he said, be careful that you are not deceived. That was his answer to them. When they asked him, how are we going to know when and what will be the signs? He just looked at them and said, be careful that you're not deceived. There's a lot of deception going on. Let's turn to the Intifada update. On Tuesday, December 1st, from Haaretz, a Palestinian man wounded an Israeli in a stabbing attack at the Gush Etzion junction in the West Bank. So on Tuesday morning, the assailant was shot dead. Then, also on Tuesday morning, a Palestinian woman tried to stab an IDF officer at a checkpoint near Ainav in the northern West Bank before being shot and killed by the officer. And a Palestinian woman carrying a knife at the Efrat junction in Gush Etzion was arrested by soldiers at the scene. From the Times of Israel, PA, Palestinian Authority, security forces arrested 6 members of an Islamic Jihad cell in the West Bank caught transporting explosives intended to be used in attacks on IDF soldiers. The PA forces have carried out several major arrests of Hamas and Islamic Jihad operatives in recent weeks, and on Monday, November 30th, the PA suspended Hamas Al-Aqsa TV in the West Bank. Then on Wednesday, December 2nd, from Ynet News, Israeli security forces demolished the East Jerusalem home of Hamas terrorist Ibrahim al-Akari, who killed 2 Israelis in a vehicular attack, ran over border police patrol and civilians with his van at a Jerusalem light rail station, and then attempted to attack passers-by with a metal rod before he was shot to death. After the attack, his son, 16 years old, told Ynet, quote, "I'm proud of my father. I'm not sad that he died a martyr." Then on Thursday, December 3rd, from Haaretz, an Israeli civilian and a soldier were shot by a Palestinian at the Hizma checkpoint north of Jerusalem. The Palestinian assailant was shot and killed at the scene. From the Jerusalem Post, Israeli security forces demolished the home of the 37-year-old Hamas terrorist Ahmed Aliwi, responsible for the murder of Ayetam and Naama Henkin in the West Bank on October 1st. I reported on that when they were driving with their 4 children. From the Times of Israel, an Israeli police officer was stabbed outside the old city of Jerusalem by a Palestinian from Tulkarem in the West Bank. The assailant was shot dead after he approached a police car and stabbed the officer. Then, Palestinian security sources identified the man who carried out another shooting attack at a checkpoint north of Jerusalem, a 37-year-old member of the PA security forces. He was shot dead by Israeli soldiers after he opened fire at the Hizma checkpoint. From Haaretz, an Israeli soldier was stabbed at a military post near Tel Rumeida in the West Bank city of Hebron, and the 2 Palestinian assailants were shot dead. Then on Friday, December 4th, from the Times of Israel, a Palestinian driver plowed his car into 2 soldiers near Silwad, north of Ramallah, in the West Bank. The 21-year-old driver was shot and killed at the scene. A short time earlier, a soldier was injured in a stabbing attack near Abud, northwest of Ramallah, by a 26-year-old male who was shot dead at the scene. Then on Saturday, December 5th, IDF soldiers uncovered dozens of pipe bombs in an underground hideout in the West Bank Palestinian village of Beit Umar, north of Hebron. Earlier in the day, a Palestinian woman was arrested at the entrance to the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron after pulling out a knife. And on Sunday, December 6th, from the Jerusalem Post, a 21-year-old male from Beit Hanina first tried to run over a child, then drove his car into a pedestrian, and then exited his vehicle brandishing a knife and stabbed a police officer before being killed by security forces. To recap, Islamic terrorists struck in America last week during a holiday party in San Bernardino, California. Newly constructed tunnels are being discovered between Gaza and Egypt. A massive new IDF urban training base with underground facilities for anti-tunnel warfare is under construction in the Golan Heights. Russia has expanded its military operations in Syria to include a second air base, and has begun the supply of S-300 air defense systems to Iran, not to mention the recent deployment of the Russian S-400 missile defense system in Syria. The Iraqi army sent a military force to Baiji and fired a rocket during the operation to retake the Baiji oil refinery. 4 Royal Air Force Tornadoes, fighter jets, targeted an oil field in eastern Syria, and Britain has now joined France in a U.S.-led coalition committed to attacking ISIS. Syrian Turkmen rebel fighters seized 3 villages from ISIS near the Turkish border. More than 15 explosions hit Daesh-held positions near Raqqa, and more than 40 other Daesh members were injured in U.S.-led airstrikes. Groups receiving support from the United States and its allies have turned their guns on each other in a northern corner of Syria, and the United States is financing both sides. There were 9 Palestinian stabbing attacks, 3 Palestinian shootings, and 2 Palestinian vehicular attacks last week. And that, my friends, is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Abba willing, I'll see you here again next week. Until then, Stay safe and shalom.
Crowded rooms, I need more space than I consume. Enough is time alone with you, underneath the naked moon, sharing confidential moods and making chatter. Mockingbird nocturnal sings notations of eternal things, entering the quantum breeze, flying not for want of wings. He lights his gaze on you and me, simply because we matter.